Hello everyone, my name is Gabby, and welcome to the first episode of Tropes, Shonen and Dragon Ball. Name sort of still pending. And our topic for this video? Power levels.
Vegeta, what does the scouter say about his power level?
It's over 9,000!
What, 9,000? There's no way that can be right!
Yes, I had to put that in there. But I didn't just put it there because it's iconic. I'm putting that there because, for once, we're actually going to look at what they mean by over 9,000. Anyway, let's get started. What is a power level? Or a battle power? Well, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's a value, usually numerical, that tries to explain how powerful a character is in terms of combat strength. Dragon Ball is the trope codifier of power levels. If you think of power levels, you probably think of Dragon Ball Z. There's almost no question about it. Power levels were first introduced in chapter 195 of the original Dragon Ball manga, or in chapter 1 of the Z manga if you're familiar with the English publication. The mysterious alien Raditz, after arriving on Earth, is drawn with a strange sci-fi looking glass device over his eye. It turns out this device's purpose is to detect individuals with strong power, and, most importantly for this video, it gives the wearer a numerical value for that individual's power. Now the question here is, why was this introduced? I think, like a lot of tropes, it comes down to common sense. Having a numerical value placed upon a character's strength is incredibly beneficial for judging who has the upper hand in a fight. Especially by Goku's fight with Piccolo in Dragon Ball, it was getting to the point where a character's strength couldn't just be measured by feats alone. For example, Piccolo might have been able to destroy the ring in the Tenkaichi Budokai, but then again, so could Tenshinhan in the previous tournament, and we all assumed that Piccolo was much stronger than that. And a crucial rule in a fighting manga like Dragon Ball is you have to communicate who is stronger at any given moment. Even if the opponents are equally matched, at some point you need to tell the audience that. And it's very hard to work something like that out from just panels of punches and kicks alone. Especially in a series like Dragon Ball, where characters don't fight in the realm of human possibility. We don't know who's stronger, we don't know who's hiding their full power, we don't know who's desperate just from the images. We need exposition to tell us that. And power levels are a very easy way of telling the audience this information. Another reason why power levels were so useful was that it gave us a real sense of scale. To explain this, I think we need to stop and consider one of the most important characters in all of Dragon Ball Z. I'm talking, of course, about Farmer with Shotgun. And no, I'm not joking here. The opening scene, where Raditz comes out of his space pod and reads that the farmer has a power level of 5. It was a crucial scene. You see, the scene essentially set the bottom of the scale for power levels. Imagine what would have happened if this wasn't there. Raditz would have shown up and gone and fought Goku and Piccolo, said Goku and Piccolo's power levels were in around the 300 ranges, and that's it. It would be nothing more than a meaningless number because we don't know what an average, normal power level is. We would have no sense of scale because there would be nothing to compare it to. And also, by reading the farmer's power level, we get to see just how much Goku and Piccolo had gone beyond regular human limitations. At that scale, it'd take over 60 humans fighting at once to even get close to Piccolo or Goku's level. Or even more than that. For as we see with the fight with Raditz, the Earthlings have a unique skill. Rather than having one constant power level, they're able to raise and lower it depending on the situation. Goku and Piccolo's power levels raise from around the 300s to the 400s after taking off their weighted clothing, and then rise to over 1000 when they're firing off their signature ki attacks. This is used to give the humans, or rather the human-raised characters, an advantage. The antagonist relies solely on the scouter's reading, and this causes them to underestimate their opponents. The humans really abuse this once they realize how reliant the aliens are on this kind of information. For the aliens, it's like they're living in the 21st century and then suddenly they have to be transported back in time and having to get information without Google. That would be really hard, and that's why it's so difficult when power levels aren't useful. Back in the plot, Bulma repurposes Raditz's scouter and gives us a nice set of power levels for the other members of the cast. Muten Roshi is 139, Krillin is 206, Tenshinhan is 250, and Yamcha is 177. Interesting that was the point where Krillin was now stronger than Yamcha. And once again, the point of this is to get a sense of scale. We now know that the other Z fighters are much stronger than regular humans, but still a sizable amount weaker than Goku and Piccolo. I mean, sure, this is something we had been implied throughout all of Dragon Ball, but here we were getting real numerical proof of it. A year passes and the Saiyans arrive, and Nappa Scouter starts reading that the humans' power levels have all increased into the 1000s range. This time, power levels are being used to communicate to us that the training that the humans have gone through that previous year has paid off. They've become stronger. A lot stronger. Probably stronger than Goku was at the beginning of Dragon Ball Z. But this is also the point where the concept of the power level trope starts getting played around with. Vegeta mentions to Nappa to take off his scouter during the fight. It's meaningless to simply rely on numbers to determine its outcome, especially against Earthlings. But power levels are still being used to give us a sense of scale, though. The highest recorded reading that we get during that fight is Gohan's Masenko at 2,800. Then Goku shows up late to the fight and blows everyone away with his power level that was being recorded of over 8,000. It's originally over 8,000. The dub changed it for some reason, I don't exactly know why. Something to do with the lip flaps? In this case, the power level is there to get the audience excited. Goku's power is over 8,000? That's ridiculous! That's the highest we've seen so far! Goku must be really strong! It definitely gets us hyped to actually see him in action, knowing how much stronger he is compared to what he used to be, and compared to the other members of the cast. And this all happens without us even seeing what he can do. See how convenient this trope is? However, after the Saiyan attack, the characters go dynamic. In this subsequent saga, the shortcomings of power levels start becoming clear, because we get a lot more of them. On Namek, every villain is a member of Frieza's army. As a result, they all have scouters. Even when the scouters are destroyed early on, individuals are still familiar with their own power levels, and often exposit these to try and terrify the heroes. The real problem the story encountered was, by giving us an effective scale of power, we got to see just how ridiculously easy it was to gain such power, especially for Goku. We've all established that his power level was over 8,000. By the time he arrived on Namek, he managed to find ways to get it to over 180,000. Even adjusting for the Kaioken, that's still completely ridiculous. From fighting Nappa to fighting Ginyu, Goku's power increases over 20 times. But the funny thing is, usage of power levels pretty much ends at the Ginyu Force. After their big boss Frieza estimates his second form has a power level of over 1 million, we don't get a mention of power levels ever again. They completely drop off the radar. Now why is that? It's a question I don't see asked that often, but one of the answers I've heard for it is because the numbers were getting too high. I actually don't think that's the case. We were only at over 1 million, and that's not too ridiculously high, especially in Japanese. They're used to very high numbers. It's because of their currency. $1 million is a lot, but 1,000,000 yen? Not so much. If you convert dollars to yen, you have to add another roughly 2 zeros. So in Japan, they're used to measuring higher values because their country runs on the equivalent of cents. That's why they have commonplace words for numbers like quintillion. So for them, 1 million is not that high. In my opinion, I think one of the reasons why power levels were dropped was because of the polarizing effect it had on the fans. Suddenly, fights came down to feats of mathematics. It didn't matter who you liked more, they had numbers, and numbers are a lot more official sounding. It sort of sterilized the fights, made them start running on logic as opposed to emotion and drama. And I don't think that makes for particularly compelling storytelling. And also, from a storytelling perspective, it would really tie Akira Toriyama down. Now that he'd introduced these numbers, he'd have to give the audience a running tally of everyone's power levels in every battle. If you think about it, power levels are dropped just as the fight with Frieza starts, the biggest and longest group battle in the series, with several mid-fight power-ups. Imagine if they had to stop the fight and read the power levels every time Krillin shot a Hyenzan, or every time Gohan got angry, or where Piccolo took off his weights, or after Vegeta got healed and got a Zenkai boost. That would really ruin the pace of the story. In a life or death situation, who cares about numbers? All that should have mattered to the characters was staying alive. But if the scouters were there, If the power levels were there, the audience would have expected more readings, because that's what they had been used to. And I think that's why Toriyama decided to drop the concept of power levels altogether. In universe, it made perfect sense. Frieza did neither Scouter, neither did the heroes. All later villains didn't use Scouters in any real capacity, so we didn't need the power levels anymore. So power levels were dropped, with surprisingly little fanfare. The concept briefly reappeared in the Buu saga with a different name and a different scale, but it was so quick it didn't really leave much of an impact. All it taught us was that Goku had enough power to destroy the planet several times over, something we had already assumed for ourselves. And that was how power levels were used in the story of Dragon Ball. In terms of its legacy, power levels, as we've all learned, were very popular, and they were a very effective tool. So as a result, you see power levels cropping up in a lot of shonen material. Of course, since Dragon Ball effectively reserved measuring powers in terms of numbers, you'll often see classes or tiers of power, from like the different classes of ninja in Naruto to the rankings of demons in Yu Yu Hakusho. Writers seem to like to have their badasses conveniently ordered in terms of fighting skill. The most popular example of another numerical value in a shonen material is probably in One Piece, where the most infamous pirates have numerical values of their bounties. The difference is bounties are given to pirates by the government, and as a result, the number of the bounty often corresponds to how much the government considers them a threat, so not always by how powerful they are, although that it can sometimes correlate. So that's pretty much all I had to talk about, but I'm going to leave this video off by answering one important question. At the end of the day, do power levels really matter? Some people seem to think that's not the case. For example, Screw Attack, in their first Goku vs Superman death battle, explained that power levels were nothing more than a joke, that the entire point of them was to show how unreliable and meaningless they were. Or, in layman's terms,
Power levels are bullshit!
I agree with this. To some extent. In a way, they are right. Power levels are meaningless. If you're just looking at them to work out who would win on a one-on-one fight, and that's Death Battle's forte. But we need to remember that they're used for more than just that. Power levels are a plot device, a tool, and, well, a trope. They're there for us. They're there to show us how strong an opponent is. They're there to get us excited from the sheer scale the power levels communicate. And they're not necessarily there for what-if scenarios and fictional in-universe debates. Really, I think the focus on power levels made enjoying the story a lot more annoying. In the end, removing the concept was probably for the best. But I won't deny, removing power levels did leave us with the same obstacles that plagued us before Dragon Ball Z started. If you don't have a number scale, how do you communicate how strong the characters are? Especially in the later portions where we don't get to see as many individual feats as we do at the beginning of Dragon Ball. This is an important question, one of the most important in the series, and it doesn't have a simple answer. To fully understand it, we'll have to look into more tropes. There are quite a few of them, all dedicated to this one question. So, I'll see you guys next time for another one of Dragon Ball's most infamous tropes. The general name of it? The Worf Effect. See you guys then!